I'm Allison Mitchell, 34, a cybersecurity specialist for a government contractor with top secret clearance. My loving family has always struggled with boundaries, especially regarding my work. They don't understand that my boring office job involves national security protocols that can't be breached. Last month, what started as typical family snooping during a visit spiraled into a full-blown Homeland Security incident with agents swarming my home. What they thought were just basic work files turned out to be classified documents that compromised national security. Before I share how my family's curiosity became a federal case, drop a comment letting me know where you're watching from and subscribe if you've ever had relatives who just don't understand boundaries. Growing up in suburban Pennsylvania, I was always the tech-savvy one in my family. While most teenage girls my age were focused on typical high school concerns, I was teaching myself coding and dreaming about digital security. My parents, Eleanor and Richard Mitchell, never quite understood my passion but supported me anyway. They were old school. Dad worked 30 years at the same manufacturing company, and Mom was an elementary school teacher who still prefers handwritten notes to emails. After earning my bachelor's in computer science, I landed a position at a tech startup in Northern Virginia. 3 years later, I completed my master's with a specialization in cybersecurity. My career trajectory changed dramatically when a government contractor recruited me for my expertise in identifying and patching security vulnerabilities. The pay was excellent, but more importantly, the work was meaningful. I was directly contributing to protecting critical national infrastructure. What I couldn't fully explain to my family was exactly what I did or the level of security clearance required. The extensive background checks, polygraphs, and psychological evaluations I underwent weren't casual workplace procedures. They were federal requirements for handling sensitive information. My parents thought it was excessive and paranoid. My brother Jason, 5 years younger, and with a community college IT certificate, constantly claimed he could do my job easily despite having no concept of the specialized training required. Then there's my Aunt Deborah, my mother's sister. While loving, she's the family gossip hub with an extensive network of friends who know everyone's business within hours. She's the type who reads private mail by accident and remembers every detail to share later. At family gatherings, they'd ask about my work, and I'd deflect with vague answers about computer security and fixing problems. This created a dynamic where they viewed my professional boundaries as personal rejection rather than federal requirements. Their hurt feelings led to increasingly invasive behaviors to stay connected with my life. The boundary violations started small. During visits, my mother would reorganize my home office while helping clean despite my explicit request to leave that room alone. My brother would ask to use my personal laptop because his was too slow, then snoop through my files while claiming he was just looking for the browser. Aunt Deborah would pick up my phone to see your cute background, but scroll through notifications instead. Each time I'd establish firmer boundaries and explain that my work required confidentiality, but they interpreted this as being secretive and dramatic. The phrase, "We're family, you can trust us," became a common refrain, completely missing that trust wasn't the issue, federal law was. My home setup reflected these challenges. I purchased a modest 3-bedroom townhouse in Arlington with a dedicated home office equipped with security features that my family found excessive specialized locks, privacy screens on monitors, and secure storage. I maintained separate devices for work and personal use, with the work equipment using government-mandated encryption and authentication protocols. Despite these precautions, I developed a dangerous complacency. I believed my technical safeguards were sufficient protection against well-meaning but boundary-challenged family members. I underestimated how a combination of curiosity, misguided helpfulness, and technical overconfidence could bypass not just my physical boundaries, but my digital ones as well. This false sense of security would ultimately lead to the most serious professional crisis of my career. one that would test not only my relationships but potentially end everything I'd worked for. My parents' 35th wedding anniversary arrived last spring, and since they'd been hinting about wanting to visit Washington, D.C. for years, I invited them to stay with me for a week-long celebration. My brother Jason decided to join them, and Aunt Deborah, never one to miss a family gathering, invited herself along as well. In preparation for their arrival, I transformed my guest bedroom and converted my home office sofa into a pull-out bed. I created a detailed schedule of tourist attractions, restaurant reservations, and activities to keep everyone entertained and, more importantly, away from my work equipment. I set up a separate guest Wi-Fi network with limited access and cleared my personal laptop of any work-related bookmarks or references. For the first 3 days, everything went perfectly. We visited the National Mall, took photos at all the monuments, and enjoyed guided tours of the Capitol and museums. My parents were thrilled, especially when I surprised them with dinner reservations at an upscale restaurant in Georgetown where a string quartet played their wedding song. Even Aunt Deborah was on her best behavior, limiting her gossip to stories about neighbors back home rather than prying into my life. On the 4th day, halfway through their visit, the situation changed. I received an urgent email from my supervisor about a critical security patch that needed implementation within a 24-hour window. The timing couldn't have been worse. We had tickets for a Potomac River cruise that afternoon. After apologizing profusely, I explained that I needed to work for a few hours but would join them later. "It's just a boat ride," my mother said with a disappointed smile. "Your father and I can go another time." "Absolutely not," I insisted. "This is your anniversary trip. Take lots of pictures, enjoy the cruise, and I'll meet you for dinner afterward." I set them up with detailed directions to the harbor prepaid ride services for transportation and restaurant recommendations near the dock for after the cruise. Before they left, I gave explicit instructions: "I need to do some sensitive work, so please don't enter my office under any circumstances. I've left snacks in the kitchen, and there are tablets and magazines in the living room if you get bored. My personal laptop is on the coffee table if you need to check emails or browse the internet, but please don't touch my work equipment." As they were gathering their things, I took a quick work call in the kitchen discussing the security patch deadline with my colleague. I noticed my brother lingering nearby, clearly eavesdropping. When I finished the call, he approached with that familiar look of unwarranted technical confidence. "Sounds like you've got system updates to run," Jason said, leaning against the counter. "I can help with that while you're working. I just installed a great optimization software on Dad's computer last week. Thanks, but this is specialized security software that requires specific clearance," I replied firmly. "It's not like updating Windows." He shrugged with a slight eye roll. "Whatever. It's all just computers in the end." That comment should have been a red flag, but I dismissed it. After all, my work laptop was encrypted with multiple authentication factors, and I'd be in my office with the door closed. What could possibly happen? After they left, I focused intensely on implementing the security patch, losing track of time as I worked through complex protocols and documentation. Around 4:00 p.m., I realized I needed to pick up the anniversary cake I'd custom ordered from a bakery across town, plus collect the gift I'd had engraved at a specialty shop. Both places would close by 6:00 p.m., and I was only about 70% through my work tasks. After weighing my options, I decided to quickly run these errands and finish the work afterward. I secured my system without fully logging off, planning to return within 90 minutes to complete everything before meeting my family for dinner. I specifically left my office door closed and locked, taking the key with me. As I drove to the bakery, I felt a slight uneasiness about leaving work mid-process, but reassured myself that my security measures were robust and my family was out on their cruise. What I didn't account for was that river cruises sometimes return early due to weather conditions, or that my brother had been eyeing my home office with growing curiosity for days. I returned home arms full with a large anniversary cake box and elegantly wrapped gifts around 5:30 p.m. Immediately, something felt wrong. The house wasn't empty as expected. I could hear voices and laughter from the living room. More alarmingly, my office door stood wide open. My stomach dropped as I set down the cake and rushed toward my workspace. Inside the living room, my entire family was casually seated as if nothing was amiss. My brother Jason had a particularly satisfied expression that instantly raised my alarm bells. "You're back early," I said, trying to keep my voice steady. "The cruise was shorter than advertised," my father explained. "Only went about halfway down the river before turning back. Something about water levels being too low. We tried calling, but you didn't answer," my mother added. Before I could respond, Jason jumped in with the words that would begin my nightmare. "I took the opportunity to help organize your computer while you were gone. Your desktop was a mess. I cleaned everything up, installed some updates, and even improved your security settings." The casual way he said this, as if expecting praise, sent ice through my veins. "What exactly did you do to my work computer?" I asked, my voice tightly controlled. "Nothing major," he shrugged. "Just moved all those buried files to your desktop so you can find them easier. Those encrypted folders were a mess. No wonder you can't find anything. I also disabled some of those annoying security pop-ups that were probably slowing everything down." I bolted to my office, finding exactly what I feared. My encrypted work drives had been tampered with files, moved into unsecured locations, and authentication protocols showed multiple failed login attempts. Worse, the security patch installation had been interrupted, potentially leaving vulnerabilities exposed. On the desk beside my laptop lay my spare key to the office, the one I kept hidden in a drawer in the kitchen for emergencies. They hadn't picked the lock. They'd searched my home until they found a way in. When I returned to the living room, my professional training kicked in despite my personal distress. "Who else was in my office, and what did you touch?" I asked, my voice now deadly serious. "We all just took a peek," Aunt Deborah said cheerfully. "Jason said he was helping you organize things." "I was just showing Mom and Dad how complicated you make everything," Jason added defensively. "Seriously, Allison, those were just basic work files. Spreadsheets and documents. Why do you need military-grade encryption for budget reports?" My mother nodded. "Honestly, sweetie, it does seem excessive. We're family. Why are you so secretive about routine work things?" That's when I realized the catastrophic misunderstanding at play. What they saw as basic work files and spreadsheets were actually infrastructure vulnerability assessments of critical government facilities, intelligence reports on potential security threats, and operational protocols for emergency response in scenarios. The budget reports Jason mentioned were coded expenditure documents related to classified security operations. "Those weren't basic files," I said, struggling to remain calm. "They were classified government documents that I have top-secret clearance to access. By breaking into my office and tampering with my computer, you've potentially committed federal crimes." Their expressions shifted from confusion to disbelief. "Don't be so dramatic," my father scoffed. "Jason was just helping organize your computer." "This isn't about organization," I said, pulling out my phone. "This is about national security. I need to make some calls right now, and I need all of you to stay exactly where you are and not touch anything else." "You're calling work because I tidied your desktop," Jason laughed. "Come on, sis." I ignored him, stepping into the kitchen to make the dreaded call to my supervisor. Mark Daniels answered on the second ring, and I explained the situation as clinically as possible. Breach containment protocol initiated, he responded immediately, his voice grave. Secure the premises, prevent anyone from leaving, and do not allow any external communications. A team will be there within 30 minutes. When I returned to the living room, my family's expressions had finally begun shifting from annoyed to concerned. "What's going on?" my mother asked, her voice smaller now. "A security team is coming to assess the damage," I said flatly. "I need everyone's phones and electronic devices now, and no one can leave until they arrive." "This is ridiculous," Jason protested. "I was helping. Did you take any pictures of what you saw on my computer?" I asked pointedly. His momentary hesitation told me everything. "I just took a few screenshots of some interesting diagrams," he admitted. "I wanted to ask you about them later." The room temperature seemed to drop 10 degrees as the full implications sank in. "Where are those screenshots now?" I asked already, knowing the answer. "I sent a couple to my phone. And I might have shared one in our family group chat because it looked like some kind of cool network design." In that moment, as my aunt looked guiltily at her phone and my parents exchanged worried glances, I realized this was far worse than I had initially thought. The breach wasn't contained to my home. It had already spread through unsecured digital channels to multiple devices and potentially beyond. 28 minutes after my call to Mark, a black SUV pulled up outside my townhouse. Two professionally dressed individuals approached my door. Agent Sarah Collins and Agent Michael Torres from the initial security response team. Despite their casual appearance, the badges they presented and their methodical efficiency made their federal authority clear. My family watched in growing alarm as the agents set up equipment in my living room and began a preliminary assessment. Agent Collins took me aside for a detailed account, while Agent Torres began questioning my family members individually, starting with Jason. "We need a full inventory of all electronic devices in the house," Agent Collins instructed me. "Phones, tablets, laptops, cameras, anything capable of storing digital information." As I compiled the list, including serial numbers and account information, I could hear my brother's voice rising defensively from the kitchen where Agent Torres was interviewing him. "It was just some technical diagrams and spreadsheets," Jason insisted. "Anyone could have downloaded them from the internet probably." "Sir, these were classified documents," Agent Torres responded calmly. "They are not available on the internet, and their unauthorized access represents a significant security breach." My parents sat rigidly on the sofa, my mother occasionally dabbing at tears, while my father maintained a stony silence. Aunt Deborah couldn't stop nervously chattering, a clear tell that she was hiding something. When Agent Collins collected everyone's devices, the reality began sinking in for my family. My mother gasped when her phone was sealed in an evidence bag, and my father demanded to know if they needed a lawyer. The agents neither confirmed nor denied, explaining only that this was currently an investigative procedure, not a criminal prosecution. "We'll need complete access to all cloud accounts and backups as well," Agent Collins informed us. "Any place where photos or documents might have been automatically synced." That's when Aunt Deborah broke down. "I might have forwarded that interesting diagram to my friend Patricia," she admitted tearfully. "She used to work for an engineering firm, and I thought she might know what it was." Agent Torres immediately stepped away to make a call, and within minutes, additional personnel were dispatched to locate and confiscate Patricia's devices as well. As the initial assessment continued, the agent's demeanor grew increasingly serious. Agent Collins stepped outside to make a call, and when she returned, she informed me that a full Homeland Security team was being deployed. "The breach appears more significant than initially assessed," she explained privately. "Director Reynolds is coming personally with a specialized team." My heart sank as I realized the implications. Thomas Reynolds was the regional director of cybersecurity operations. His involvement meant this was being treated as a major national security incident. By now, my family had progressed from irritation to genuine fear. My brother sat with his head in his hands, the bravado entirely gone. My mother was openly crying while my father paced in the small confines permitted by the agents. "Are we going to jail?" Jason asked me when Agent Torres stepped away momentarily. "I don't know," I answered truthfully. "It depends on what you accessed and shared and whether there was malicious intent." "I was just trying to help," he repeated, but the excuse sounded hollow even to him now. "You broke into a secured space, bypassed encryption-accessed classified documents without authorization, and shared them externally," I said, the betrayal and anger finally bleeding into my voice. "That's not helping Jason. That's a federal crime." My supervisor, Mark, arrived before the main Homeland Security team looking grave and exhausted. He pulled me aside while the agents continued their work. "How bad is it?" I asked. "Bad," he confirmed. "Preliminary assessment shows access to Level 3 classified materials, including infrastructure vulnerability reports and operational security protocols." The family group chat where images were shared had cloud backup enabled, and at least one external party has confirmed receiving forwarded materials. I felt physically ill. "My clearance suspended pending investigation," Mark said, his expression sympathetic but firm. "I'm sorry, Allison. Protocol is clear in these situations." As this devastating news sank in, 3 more black SUVs pulled up outside and the full Homeland Security team arrived. 8 specialists in various aspects of cybersecurity and counterintelligence entered my home, transforming it into an official investigation scene. Director Reynolds, a stern man in his 50s with military precision in his movements, took command immediately. Under his direction, my house perimeter was secured, and neighbors were given a cover story about a gas leak investigation to explain the unusual activity. As the specialized equipment was brought in and set up in my home office, the reality of the situation finally seemed to hit my family. This wasn't an overreaction. This wasn't workplace politics. This was a legitimate national security breach, and they had caused it. Director Reynolds established a mobile command center in my living room, while the technical team worked in my office. The efficient transformation of my home into a secure operations site was both impressive and terrifying. Neighbors peered curiously from windows as additional personnel established a perimeter, and a satellite communication array was set up on my small back patio. My family members were formally separated for in-depth interviews. My parents in the dining room, Jason in the kitchen, Aunt Deborah in the guest bedroom, and me in what had been my sanctuary, my home office, now crawling with technical specialists downloading and analyzing every byte of data. "We've identified exactly what was accessed," the lead technical analyst reported as she showed Director Reynolds and me a detailed log. "The subject managed to access 3 categories of classified materials by exploiting the interrupted authentication sequence during your security update. The subject, my own brother, had accessed: first, infrastructure vulnerability assessments for several critical facilities, including power grids and water treatment plants. These documents detailed specific weaknesses that could be exploited in potential attack scenarios. Second, preliminary intelligence reports on potential domestic threats, including patterns of activity from known extremist groups. These contained names, locations, and surveillance summaries of ongoing investigations. Third, and most alarming, operational security protocols for government contractors working on sensitive projects. Essentially a blueprint for how to circumvent our own security measures. "How did he bypass the encryption?" I asked, professional curiosity momentarily overriding my personal distress. The analyst pulled up a technical breakdown. "Your interrupted patch created a temporary vulnerability. When the system attempted to restart authentication, it created a brief window where the standard password would be accepted without the secondary authentication factors. Your brother appears to have tried common passwords until finding your default system one. My stomach dropped. The default password was a variation of my cat's name, something my family would easily guess. My personal mistake had compounded the professional breach. Meanwhile, the forensic analysis of my family's devices revealed the full spread of information. Jason had taken 12 screenshots of classified materials, saving them to his phone. He shared 3 images in the family group chat, which had automatic cloud backup enabled. Aunt Deborah had forwarded one diagram to her friend Patricia, who had then shown it to her husband, a retired engineer. The information had already spread to 5 unauthorized individuals and 3 unsecured cloud services before we contained it. When I rejoined Director Reynolds in the command center, his expression was grim. "Miss Mitchell, we're facing a Class 2 security breach with multi-vector exposure," he informed me. While we believe we've contained the immediate spread, the compromise of operational protocols means we need to implement countermeasures across multiple agencies. The implications were staggering. Because of my family's actions, security procedures would need to be changed at dozens of facilities. Ongoing intelligence operations might be compromised, and resources would be diverted to damage control rather than their intended purposes. My professional reputation lay in shambles. Colleagues who had respected me now looked at me with suspicion or pity. Years of meticulous work building credibility in a male-dominated field were erased by a single incident that painted me as careless and unprofessional. The personal dimension was equally devastating. When my family was briefly brought together before being separated again for further questioning, the emotional temperature in the room was unbearable. "How could you not tell us your work was this serious?" my mother cried, tears streaming down her face. "We thought you were being dramatic about ordinary office work." "I told you repeatedly it was classified," I responded, exhaustion evident in my voice. "I told you never to enter my office or touch my equipment. I literally locked the door." "You should have said it was a matter of national security," my father countered angrily. "That's exactly what classified government work means," I shot back. Jason sat silently, the weight of his actions finally sinking in. When he finally spoke, his voice was small. "Will I go to prison for this?" Director Reynolds answered before I could. "That depends on several factors, including your level of cooperation now and whether we determine there was malicious intent rather than merely negligence." Aunt Deborah was beside herself with anxiety, particularly after learning that federal agents had already visited her friend Patricia to confiscate devices and require non-disclosure agreements. As the day stretched into evening and then night, the Homeland Security team continued their work with methodical precision. Around midnight, Director Reynolds delivered the news I had been dreading. "Miss Mitchell, I'm required to inform you that you are suspended from all duties pending a complete investigation. Your security clearance is temporarily revoked, and you are prohibited from accessing any classified systems or facilities until further notice." Despite having expected this hearing, the official declaration was crushing. 5 years of dedicated service, countless hours of specialized training, and a career I had built with meticulous care, all jeopardized because my family couldn't respect a locked door. When I was finally alone in my bedroom, the only room in my house not actively being processed by federal agents, I broke down completely. Years of maintaining professional composure dissolved as I sobbed into my pillow, overwhelmed by betrayal, fear, and uncertainty about my future. The days following the breach unfolded in a surreal haze of procedural requirements and emotional devastation. My family was placed under temporary surveillance protocols requiring them to report their whereabouts and activities daily to a designated federal officer. Before being allowed to return home, they each signed extensive non-disclosure agreements with explicit warnings about the severe penalties for discussing any aspect of what had occurred. I learned that two federal agents had visited Aunt Deborah's friend Patricia at her home in Pennsylvania, confiscating her phone and laptop while requiring both her and her husband to sign similar agreements. The ripple effect of my family's actions continued to spread outward, affecting people who had no idea they were being pulled into a national security incident. The tension within my family reached unbearable levels. During their final day at my house, before arrangements were made for them to return home, my mother vacillated between tears and recriminations. "I raised you to trust your family," she said during one particularly painful conversation. "Now we're being treated like criminals because you value your job over us." "This isn't about trust," I tried to explain for what felt like the 100th time. "This is about legally binding obligations I have to protect classified information. It has nothing to do with how much I love you." My father, usually the mediator in family conflicts, had retreated into cold silence, speaking only when directly addressed by the federal agents. His disappointment and sense of betrayal radiated from him in palpable waves. Jason's reaction was the most volatile, cycling between profuse apologies and defensive blame. "I'm sorry I messed up your computer," he would say, sincerely, only to follow minutes later with, "But if your security was actually good, I wouldn't have been able to access anything anyway." Each attempt to explain the concept of layered security and how his actions had exploited a specific vulnerability during a maintenance procedure fell on deaf ears. In his mind, the fact that he could bypass the security meant the security itself was flawed, not that his actions were wrong. After my family departed, I faced the aftermath alone. The professional consequences mounted daily. My apartment underwent a thorough security sweep, with agents documenting every item that could potentially store digital information. My personal devices were permanently confiscated as part of the investigation, leaving me with loaner equipment that had strict usage limitations. My project team had to completely redo months of work since the security protocols had been compromised. Systems had to be reconfigured, authentication methods changed, and vulnerability assessments updated, all requiring hundreds of hours of work from dozens of people. My colleagues' reactions varied widely. Some expressed genuine sympathy, having experienced boundary-pushing family members themselves. Others maintained professional courtesy but clearly harbored resentment at the additional workload my situation had created. A few openly questioned my competence, suggesting that anyone truly qualified for top-secret clearance would have had better safeguards in place. The financial impact hit hard as well. While technically still employed during the investigation, my special security clearance pay was suspended. I found myself consulting with expensive legal specialists in security clearance issues, rapidly depleting my savings. The uncertainty of whether I would ever work in my field again loomed over every expenditure. Perhaps most disconcerting was the psychological assessment required before any potential reinstatement. Sitting across from Dr. Marina Chen, the government-appointed psychologist, I felt my professional identity being dissected. "Do you find it difficult to establish clear boundaries with family members?" she asked, her pen poised over her notepad. Evidently, I replied with unintended bitterness. "How would you characterize your approach to conflict resolution within your family system?" Each question probed the intersection of my personal relationships and professional responsibilities, implying that the breach was as much a psychological failure as a security one. 3 weeks into the investigation, I reached my darkest moment. Sitting alone in my living room, surrounded by the lingering evidence of the security team's presence, subtle marks on my hardwood floors from equipment residue from fingerprint powder on door frames, I found myself contemplating whether my career was permanently destroyed. I opened my journal and wrote, "Today I realized I might never work in cybersecurity again." 5 years of specialized training, countless certifications, and a genuine passion for protecting digital infrastructure all potentially ended because I couldn't make my family understand a locked door means keep out. The most painful part is that they still don't fully comprehend what they did. They see themselves as victims of excessive government paranoia rather than people who compromised national security. How do I reconcile my love for them with the damage they've caused? How do I rebuild a career from these ashes? Maybe most importantly, how do I ensure I never put myself in this position again? That journal entry marked the lowest point of my crisis. It also became the turning point where I stopped seeing myself as a helpless victim of circumstances and started reclaiming control over my situation. The morning after writing that journal entry, I made my first proactive decision since the breach. Instead of waiting for the government investigation to dictate my fate, I contacted Natalie Parker, an attorney specializing in security clearance issues with a background in both military and civilian cases. The first thing you need to understand, Natalie explained during our initial consultation, is that cooperation and accountability will serve you better than defensiveness. The investigation isn't just about what happened, but about how you respond to it. Under her guidance, I developed a strategic approach rather than simply reacting to each new development. Instead of fighting the investigation or deflecting responsibility, I would demonstrate my commitment to security protocols and my understanding of where lapses had occurred. I began documenting a detailed timeline of events leading up to and following the breach, including my own security measures, the specific instructions given to my family, and my immediate response once I discovered the violation. This chronology highlighted both my established safeguards and the areas where I needed to implement stronger controls. Natalie helped me prepare for the series of interviews with the investigative team, coaching me to be forthright about my mistakes while demonstrating my understanding of their significance. When questioned about why I left work mid-process during the security patch, I acknowledged the error in judgment rather than offering excuses. I prioritized a personal errand over security protocol, I stated clearly. That decision created the vulnerability that was later exploited. It was a serious lapse in judgment that I take full responsibility for. This approach of honest accountability proved more effective than I initially expected. The investigator's demeanor subtly shifted from suspicious scrutiny to professional assessment. Simultaneously, I began developing enhanced security protocols for my home office that went beyond the government's minimum requirements. I researched advanced biometric access controls, physical security improvements, and separation protocols for when visitors were present. I compiled these into a comprehensive proposal that I submitted voluntarily to the investigation team. I enrolled in additional security training courses, focusing specifically on non-technical aspects like social engineering and family management for cleared personnel. While these wouldn't count toward reinstatement directly, they demonstrated my commitment to addressing the human element of security that had been exploited. Perhaps most difficult was establishing new explicit boundaries with my family. I drafted written agreements about home visits that clearly outlined restricted areas and prohibited behaviors. I developed a simplified educational packet explaining security classifications and legal consequences without revealing classified details. Initially, these efforts were met with continued resentment. My mother called the written agreement cold and impersonal. My father questioned whether I was still part of this family. Jason dismissed the educational materials as government propaganda. The breakthrough came unexpectedly through my brother. After his third interview with federal investigators, including a polygraph examination focusing on his intent, Jason called me late one evening. "I get it now," he said, his voice uncharacteristically subdued. One of the agents walked me through what could have happened if those documents had reached the wrong people. It wasn't just rules I was breaking. People could have been hurt. This acknowledgement opened the door to more substantive conversations with my family. We scheduled a video call with my parents, where Jason shared his new understanding, helping them see beyond their perception of government overreaction. "They're not being dramatic, Mom," he explained. "The stuff I accessed could legitimately endanger people if it got out. The security isn't about keeping secrets from family. It's about protecting the country." Seeing their son, who had initially been the most defensive, now acknowledging the severity of the situation, helped my parents begin their own shift in perspective. My father, who had remained distant, finally asked questions about how security clearances actually worked rather than dismissing the entire concept. Aunt Deborah's transformation came after her friend Patricia's husband was temporarily investigated for his engineering background, causing stress in their decades-long friendship. The concrete consequences to someone she cared about made the abstract concept of security breaches personally meaningful. "I never thought sharing a little diagram could cause so much trouble," she admitted. "I always share everything with Patricia. It never occurred to me that some things actually shouldn't be shared." As my family's understanding grew, so did the preliminary feedback from the investigation. Director Reynolds himself called to inform me that their findings were trending toward negligence rather than conspiracy, a significant distinction that could potentially allow reinstatement of my clearance under probationary conditions. "Your proactive approach has been noted," he added. "It's unusual for someone under investigation to submit security improvement proposals. The technical team was particularly impressed with your biometric integration concepts." 6 weeks into the investigation, I received the first positive news. While I wouldn't be returning to my original position, there was a possibility of limited reinstatement with a probationary period and regular security audits. It wasn't full restoration of my career, but it was a path forward where previously there had seemed none. The morning I received this news, I walked through my home office, now returned to my control after the investigation team completed their on-site work. The space felt different, violated in ways that went beyond the physical. Yet, for the first time, I could envision reclaiming it, transforming it into something more secure than before. I began drafting plans for a complete redesigned separate entrance-enhanced security system, no shared spaces with visitors. The plans represented more than physical changes. They symbolized my commitment to maintaining proper boundaries between my personal and professional lives. As I worked, my phone buzzed with a text from my brother, applied to a legitimate cybersecurity program at State University. "Turns out there's a lot I don't know. Want to actually learn it right this time." That small message represented the first real healing in our relationship, an acknowledgement that expertise requires proper training and respect for established protocols. The path forward remained uncertain, but for the first time since the breach, it felt like there was a path at all. 8 months after the security breach, I received the official determination letter from the Department of Homeland Security. After reviewing the extensive investigation findings, interviews, and my responsive actions, they approved limited reinstatement of my security clearance with a 2-year probationary period and quarterly reviews. The letter stated, "While significant security protocols were breached, the investigation found no evidence of malicious intent on the part of any involved parties. Ms. Mitchell's proactive remediation efforts, transparent cooperation, and implementation of enhanced security measures demonstrate commitment to national security priorities." This wasn't a full exoneration or complete restoration of my previous position. My new assignment placed me with a different project team, focused on domestic infrastructure protection rather than the more sensitive intelligence operations I'd worked on previously. My access levels were reduced, requiring additional oversight for certain classifications of information. Nevertheless, it was a second chance at the career I loved, something I hadn't been certain would ever be possible again. The professional reintegration proved challenging. Some colleagues welcomed me back warmly, while others maintained professional distance, unsure whether the security breach reflected poor judgment that might manifest again. I found myself repeatedly proving my competence and commitment, knowing that trust once broken requires consistent demonstration to rebuild. My supervisor in the new department, Rachel Bennett, provided unexpected support. Having experienced her own security challenges early in her career, she helped me navigate the complex terrain of professional redemption. The people who matter will judge you by how you respond to failure, not by the failure itself, she advised during my first week back. The transformation in my home environment was equally significant. I had completely redesigned my home office with a separate entrance, dedicated HVAC system to ensure no shared ventilation with the main house, and a security system that would make most government facilities envious. More meaningful than these physical changes were the evolving relationships with my family. Our communication had fundamentally shifted, with greater respect for explicit boundaries and less assumption that familial love entitled unrestricted access. My parents visited 6 months after the incident, their first time back in my home since the breach. The visit operated under clear agreements established beforehand, including which spaces were accessible and what topics related to my work remained off-limits. "It's like visiting a doctor-daughter at her hospital," my father remarked as I showed them the guest areas of my home. "We don't expect to wander into operating rooms there either." That simple analogy represented significant growth in his understanding of professional boundaries within family relationships. My brother Jason had perhaps changed the most dramatically. Now enrolled in a legitimate cybersecurity program at his state university, he approached the field with newfound humility and proper respect for established protocols. "I thought I knew everything because I could build a gaming PC and install software," he admitted during a video call. "Now I'm learning how much expertise actually goes into what you do, and it's humbling." Even Aunt Deborah, who had always considered any information fair game for sharing, had developed a new appreciation for discretion. Her friendship with Patricia had survived, but transformed, with both women more thoughtful about what information truly needed to be shared. 7 months after my reinstatement, I hosted a family dinner at my home, the first time all of us had been together since the incident. As we gathered around my dining room table, the conversation inevitably turned to the lessons we had each taken from the experience. "I've learned that boundaries aren't about trust, they're about respect," my mother reflected. "When you told us not to enter your office, we took it personally instead of respecting your professional obligations." My father, always more actions than words, had built a special locked cabinet for his own important documents at home. "Got to practicing what we learned," he explained simply when I noticed it. "I thought I was helping by fixing something I didn't understand," Jason added. "That's not help. That's arrogance. Real help would have been respecting the boundaries you set." Aunt Deborah, who had been uncharacteristically quiet, finally spoke up. "I always thought sharing information was how you show love. Now I understand that sometimes keeping something private is its own form of care." As for me, I had learned painful but valuable lessons about communication boundaries and the balance between personal relationships and professional responsibilities. I should have been clearer about the severity without revealing classified details, I acknowledged. Saying it's classified wasn't enough. I needed to make sure you understood what that actually meant in concrete terms. The incident had forced me to examine my own complicity in the boundary violations. By allowing small intrusions to pass with minimal consequences, I had inadvertently trained my family to disregard my limitations. By assuming technical safeguards could compensate for human behavior management, I had created a single point of failure in my security system. As we finished dinner and moved to the living room for dessert, I realized that while the security breach had nearly destroyed my career, it had ultimately strengthened both my professional practices and my family relationships. Clear boundaries explicitly communicated and consistently enforced had replaced the ambiguous expectations and repeated violations of the past. My career continued to rebuild slowly. With each successful project and security audit, my professional reputation gradually recovered. While I might never regain the exact position or level of trust I had before, I had found a new path forward based on hard-earned wisdom and deeper understanding of both technical and human security factors. The experience had taught all of us that true respect includes respecting limitations, that love doesn't entitle unrestricted access, and that sometimes the strongest connections come from acknowledging and honoring boundaries rather than crossing them. As our family gathering concluded that evening, I realized that while I would never have chosen this painful path, the lessons it taught us had created stronger, healthier relationships and a more secure foundation for both my personal and professional life. Have you ever experienced a situation where family boundaries were crossed with serious consequences? What did you learn from the experience? Share your thoughts in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like, subscribe, and share with others who might be struggling with setting professional boundaries with loved ones. Thank you for joining me for this difficult but important story. And remember, sometimes the strongest love comes with the clearest boundaries.